Aden Durde is the new defensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. And there's a lot to talk about here because it's kind of a going after a young hire. It is a inexperienced hire, but not in a bad way that you may think the way I said it. Because at the end of the day, Mike Macdonald is going to call his own plays. And he's said that multiple times. The man they bring in for the defensive coordinator role is not going to be the one calling all the shots. So I think this is a good piece to just have to bring in some knowledge and, make an impact on the defense, not just make calls for plays, which he isn't doing. I think it's interesting because he was the defensive line coach for the Dallas Cowboys last year. And a few years actually, but the Dallas Cowboys had one of the best defensive lines, if not the best defensive line in football. And it's an interesting hire. I think they're kind of taking a little bit of a risk, going someone with a little less experience, but somebody that they think might be able to be one of those special talents in the NFL, one of those guys that comes from an unconventional background that could really affect this Seahawks defense and defensive line probably in a really impactful way. So Adam Durde, and it looks like Durde, but I've listened to some videos. It's Aden, Aden Durde has worked closely with Dan Quinn in his career, obviously in Dallas, and he helped this defensive line get really good. He was on the Chiefs and Panthers practice squads in his playing career, but he is a England native, and he played most of his football there with the London Olympians, the Scottish Claymores. Then he was on the Panthers for a practice squad year, and then the Hamburg Sea Devils, and then the Chiefs in 2008 on the practice squad. And then his NFL coaching career pretty much started in 2018, 10 years later. Defensive quality control coach for a year, 1 year of the outside linebackers coach, and with Dallas now 3 years from 2021 to 2024 as the defensive line coach. I believe he's 30 or 44 years old. And he is the first UK-born coach, defensive coordinator in the NFL history. So he's taking a big role now. It's kind of he played in NFL Europe and the NFL, and then, he embarked on this coaching career. He's 44 now, and he's taking a big step in getting a defensive coordinator role. Kind of new. Remember, 2018 to now, 6 years. Kind of feels a little like Mike Macdonald, Aden Durde, Mike Macdonald. We're going for guys with less experience, but guys that are being seen as, higher value guys, or guys that a lot of people would want in this league eventually. And we're taking a little bit of a risk on these guys, which is not bad. You have to remember, he did help cultivate the strongest part of the Cowboys defense. They finished 5th in the league in yards allowed per game with 299.7. He helped Micah Parsons since coming in the league, and they've built a really nice defense and defensive line there. And I went to PFF rankings just to kind of check it out a little more. The run defense for the Cowboys was rated 7th on PFF. Obviously, it's not all on the defensive line or not all on Adam Durde. It's about the talent and, different aspects of the run game. But these are just positive signs for somebody that was coaching a defense like this. Tackling, they were first in the NFL in PF grades by far. Dallas was at an 82.4 grade at number 1 in the NFL in tackling, which we need help with tackling. Number 2 is Cincinnati at 73.4. So a 10 grade difference, which is crazy. And pass rush, which obviously has a lot to do with the defensive line as well. They were second in the NFL, right behind the Cleveland Browns, and even above the San Francisco 49ers in pass rush. Once again, these grades are subjective and based off of what talent's on the team. Also, he was the defensive line coach, not the defensive coordinator. So you can't reference these Cowboys numbers as a total reasoning towards the coaching staff. But there's talent, there's this, there's that. But he's obviously somebody who I think I was watching Tom Pelissero talk about who's going to be the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. It obviously ended up being Mike Zimmer coming back to the NFL after his coaching stint with the Vikings last. they made it pretty clear that Adam Durde was a potential candidate internally that was interviewing. He might be young. He might only have 6 years of coaching in the NFL. He might be 44 years old and not have, as much experience as these other people like Mike Zimmer, who they hired. But he was even being a candidate for defensive coordinator role internally for the Cowboys. And that means they feel like at least, that doesn't mean, he didn't get the job, but they feel at least that he did make a great impact as a defensive line coach. And they, were considering bringing him in as defensive coordinator. But I think I understand. With a Mike McCarthy type of team, I'd understand Mike Zimmer a little more for them. I think for the Seahawks, with a young head coach at 36 and now a 44-year-old defensive coordinator, I think they're going to try to go young and maybe, I don't want to say inexperienced, but they're going to maybe go young with the offensive coordinator side as well. A lot of people were thinking Chip Kelly might be it. It wasn't. Chip Kelly ended up taking the job at Ohio State, which is quite odd considering the fact that he's leaving his head coaching job at UCLA and leaving in the same conference to take an offensive coordinator job at Ohio State. It's odd. You don't see that often, but that must mean UCLA is a bad job. And he was informed the Seahawks were not planning on hiring him. They brought in Leslie Frazier, who's 60-something years old, and I think that's where they're going with the veteran. He's the assistant head coach. He's the one that's going to help Mike Macdonald kind of, learn the ropes, maybe help him, teach him a little bit about what exactly it means to be a head coach, major decisions, things like that. And the reason they probably brought him in is because then we don't need a, very older or experienced offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. The head coach is young, defensive coordinator is young and slightly inexperienced, but once again, I don't mean that in a bad way. Now, the next big step is that OC, and we'll see where we go. I have a feeling, because it's not Chip Kelly, that the Seahawks might be waiting post-Super Bowl maybe to see what they can get from one of those teams. I'm not quite sure. But Adam Durde, it's really dirty. It's hard to say a little bit. But Adam Durde is the new defensive head coach, defensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. I think it's really interesting. I think we could see a lot of Dan Quinn out of this guy. One last piece I'll say. I said he's worked a lot under Dan Quinn, but I meant that in two ways. He was the defensive line coach this year for the Cowboys, which obviously Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator. He also was on that Falcons coaching staff as a defensive quality control coach, where Dan Quinn was the head coach at the time. So that's another big piece here to consider, is that's that connection between maybe John Schneider had some talks with Dan Quinn, even though he wasn't going to get the head coaching job in Seattle. Maybe get some good words about Adam Durde from Dan Quinn and his time in Atlanta and his time in Dallas with him, and said, give this young man a chance to be a defensive coordinator, especially maybe, we got to consider the fact that, especially with not calling the plays, Mike Macdonald is going to call the plays. He's made it very clear that he's going to call plays just like he did in Baltimore. So what does that mean for the defensive coordinator role? Somebody to help him with that, obviously, help him in the film rooms, connect with players, teach technique, teach any type of teaching and coaching on the field and off the field. And maybe that's what Adam Durde's actually good at. Maybe that's one of his biggest parts. He was a quality control coach, linebackers coach, defensive lines coach. He's obviously good at working with certain groups. So maybe they're bringing him in to be the person, right? The head of the people when it comes to the defense. And Mike Macdonald's going to continue to do what he does in calling plays, which brings me to my point exactly that, like I said, that defense or the offensive coordinator role is probably the biggest one for the Seahawks team. I think we nailed the head coach. Defensive coordinator, I don't know if we nailed it or not, but he seems like a good fit, and he's not calling plays regardless. So the really important piece now is offensive coordinator. We'll see where that goes. I appreciate y'all, and we'll be back soon. I'm Sammy on Tap. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel as well. All the links are in the bio, description, whatever you want to call it, below, including our mailing list. Get on our mailing list, please. I'd appreciate it. It's all Seattle sports. You'll get merchandise information, news, different things, giveaways, gift cards. We're going to do a lot of fun stuff on there, so please get on that mailing list. I love y'all, and we'll be back soon. Peace.